At Subway, start your day the flavorful way by adding new guacamole to your favorite breakfast sandwich. Perfectly made with a hint of jalapeno, our guacamole turns up the flavor to your breakfast. Try it today on a hot and toasty egg, white, and cheese. Subway, eat fresh.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects. The BS Report. The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. A sunny but chilly Tuesday morning here in Southern California. I know you care. Last night I went to the Clippers-Rockets game and was reminded yet again that it's never fun to watch Dwight Howard in person. It just isn't. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed it. I think we'd have to go back to like 2009. Anyway, Zach Lowe on the line right now. He's on the East Coast. Zach Lowe, how many games have you seen in person this year?
The regular season, I think we're only at 2 so far.
Yeah, this was my first one last night. I was excited for it. Chris Paul just annihilated Houston, and I noticed the same thing you tweeted about today. Houston's perimeter defense on a scale of 1 to 20 is a -3. It's really, 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 really horrible. And I know Patrick Beverley's hurt. He'll come back, but I can't imagine Patrick Beverley is going to swing Houston's perimeter defense that well. Is this the flaw of this team? Can you make the finals when you can't guard anybody in the perimeter?
Look, the Spurs are looking like, when you see a team that's as stable as the Spurs, and you see all these other teams that have like really glaring, horrible flaws, you start to think, hey, you know what? Maybe it is just same old this year in the Western Conference. Maybe I should put all my chips in the Spurs table because, Houston. Look, they're 3-1, so it's not like we can sit here and nitpick every little thing and say they're a disaster. But when they face good teams, they can't lay eggs like they did last night. And it's James Harden, Jeremy Lin, Chandler Parsons, Aaron Brooks. These guys have been bad defenders their entire NBA careers, and it's just and that's not a controversial statement, by the way. People think Chandler Parsons is like an elite stopper, and just talk to Kelvin Sampson about it. He's on record as saying all these guys are pretty bad. And they need to get a lot better for us to get where we need to go. And last night, against, in really their first big test of the season, they were a disaster. There were back cuts all over the floor. Guys didn't know where their assignments were. Aaron Brooks goes 5 miles under every pick and roll screen, even if Chris Paul is the guy with the ball. It was a total mess. And, Patrick Beverley will help, but, Houston made a lot of noise about the Twin Towers, and those guys are going to cover up for all the mistakes on the perimeter. And the Twin Towers have played 12 minutes a game together, and the offense has been a disaster in those 12 minutes a game. And I don't know. They clearly don't trust any of their young power forwards. I don't know what they're going to do. But, again, it's early.
Yeah, it's early, and you've been making this point, and I agree with it. You can't panic early. I do think you can see some things right away. If there's a glaring flaw, that's really not going to get better. And you look at the Rockets, and I don't remember Harden being this bad defensively in Oklahoma City. Yesterday, he was like a DH. It was like him and Jeremy Lin shouldn't have even run on the defensive side of the floor. Just cherry pick at the other end because you're not doing anything on defense anyway. I remember Harden at least putting up a fight on defense. And now it just seems like, it's almost like what happened to Kobe those last couple of years with the Lakers, where they're saving all their energy on defense to use it on offense. But Harden wasn't even playing that well offensively. He got benched the whole fourth quarter. The other thing is, first, do you agree with me that Harden was better defensively in Oklahoma City? I mean, he wasn't great, but he wasn't this bad.
He wasn't this bad. He was this bad for much of last season. And I agree. You hit some of it with, well, now he's the number one option and he has to play 38 minutes a game and run an entire offense. And it's hard to do that and be, a very good defensive player. It shouldn't be hard to do that and avoid being a very catastrophically bad defensive player. But remember in the finals 2 seasons ago, the Thunder threw up their hands and tried Harden on LeBron now and then in the post. I mean, it was a disaster. But yeah, he was better in a smaller role, and he hasn't been able to, get out of that DH mode in Houston.
Yeah. I was reminded last night a lot of things about things I didn't like about Dwight Howard as a basketball player, just for somebody who's the face of a franchise. It's not fun to watch him play basketball. It's not fun to watch him just get fouled. And the thing that really stands out when you see him in person is the body language stuff. And I admittedly overrate body language, and Levitard makes fun of me, calls me the body language doctor. But Howard does all these subtle stuff to sell out his teammates, and I just hate it. And I always judge these guys by, would I enjoy playing basketball with them? You know? And Chris Paul would be awesome to play basketball with. You'd be scared half the time because he's such an asshole. And he's yelling at everybody, and he's like a little general out there. But ultimately, it would make you a better basketball player. Howard, I watch in person, and it's like, you know, there's 3 or 4 plays last night where one time Chandler Parsons sailed an alley-oop over his head. Like, whatever, it happens. Howard has to do this whole thing. His shoulders sag. He's got to make a face. He's got to make Parsons feel like about it, and then he runs back. And it's like, you're the leader of the team. Like, nobody else in the league is doing this when their teammates just make basic mistakes that teams make 20 times a game. And I just don't think he gets it. I really don't. I don't think he gets that there's a whole part of being a franchise player that involves leadership, having other guys back, not selling them out, not making it seem like it's always their fault when something happens. This is stuff he doesn't get. Do you see this stuff, or am I crazy?
No, I mean, look, his entire season last year in Los Angeles was shrugging and making faces as various Lakers missed rotations or were late to help him or whatever the case was. And it's not fun to be on the receiving end of that, even if you know you deserve it. And look, we just went through the line of minus defenders that the Rockets have, and that's going to be his body language all year again if he lets it get to him that way. And he's got to lift them up. And I just thought it was funny, after they beat Charlotte in their home opener, there were all these columns that came out like, Dwight's ready, he's going to man up, he knows the opportunity in front of him, he handled his free agency like an adult. And, you know, all of that was true. He did handle his free agency like an adult, but it was one game, and then the next win was against Dallas, you know, and I don't know if Dallas had come off the back-to-back, but Dallas is just an okay team. It was all just like, the next Dwight Howard era is here and it's ready, and, you know, can we wait 20 games and see how the Rockets are first?
I don't trust him, and I will say he looked more healthy See, I don't trust this stuff until I see it in person with how healthy somebody looks. You got to watch them run. You just got to watch them walk, do everything. He looks healthier this year. At the same time, he is not the athletic superpower that he was. You know, last night on the court, him and Blake and DeAndre, if you had just brought somebody who had never seen a professional basketball game before and said, rank these guys athletically 1, 2, and 3, he would have been third. You know, like DeAndre and Blake are just as powerful and potent as athletically as he is. So I think he's lost that 15% edge that he used to have, where he used to be just this force of nature athletically, as we've talked about a million times. And, you know, he had one drop step move that I kind of like, but other than that, he seems like relatively the same player, and he's not 7'2" like Shaq, or 7'1" like Shaq was. He's not a behemoth like Will Chamberlain is. And,
no, he's 6'9". He's 6'9" with broad shoulders. He's in his 10th year in the league. 10th year. I mean, he was drafted a long time ago. He was the same draft as Emeka Okafor.
This is who he is. This is what we're watching now is what Dwight Howard is. I don't think there's a ceiling that he hasn't hit yet. I think we've seen it. You agree?
Look, what I remember from the last time we saw peak Dwight, you know, well, one of the last times we saw peak Dwight, during the 2011 season when Derrick Rose won the MVP, I thought Dwight was the MVP of the league. And I remember every time I would watch Orlando that season, there would be plays where Dwight would do something on defense where you would just say to yourself, holy shit, how are you supposed to score a basket when this guy is on the court? He just blew up a pick and roll 25 feet from the hoop, got all the way back and blocked the shot at the rim, got the rebound, threw an outlet pass, and it was like, this guy's going to win the next 10 Defensive Player of the Year awards. It's a destructive force, the likes of which doesn't exist in the league anymore. And that guy has been gone. And I don't know that the Rockets even think he's coming back. I think they'd be satisfied if 85% of him is coming back. But you don't watch Dwight Howard play defense now and say, this guy is a force of nature that can, you know, anchor an entire defense of bad defenders. You think he's good. He's one of the 20 best defenders in the league, one of the 15, maybe one of the 10. But you don't look at him and say it's a no-brainer that he's better than Roy Hibbert, Tyson Chandler, and every other elite defensive man in the league anymore.
I 100% agree, and I think another big difference last night, just watching Chris Paul, who had Jeremy Lin and Aaron Brooks on him. I mean, it was like he had to have felt like he won the lottery for 2 hours last night. Just, I'm going to dribble over here now. Oh, this play I'm going to try to dribble over here and then come back, and then I'll just hit J.J. Redick wide open after I bring 3 guys over. Like, he was doing whatever he wanted. And if you put 2009 Dwight Howard in that game, he's at least a little more concerned when he's in the paint. He wasn't concerned about anybody. And I don't want to overreact because Houston has a lot of new pieces. I want to see how they gel. But I think Dwight is who we thought he was. I think Houston had to do it. It was a no-brainer. He's still one of the best centers in the league. He can still have nights like he had that 17-point, 26-rebound night. Only 6-7 guys in the league can have a night like that. But when you watch him play against a team like the Clippers, 2009 Dwight could have made up for some of those defensive flaws that this team has. 2014 Dwight cannot. And, spinning this toward the rest of the Western Conference, we have some really bad defensive teams that are contenders in the West. The Warriors are a bad defensive team, except for Iguodala. The Clippers are a bad defensive team. The Rockets are a bad defensive team. And that brings us back to the Spurs. I picked the Spurs begrudgingly to win the West because they were the safest bet. I feel like this is all going in their favor. Don't you feel that way a little bit?
Well, that's what I meant before. I mean, we've seen, all of these teams that have come out looking like, okay, the Clippers they may be last in the league in defensive efficiency right now. In fact, they are. The Grizzlies are finding their footing. Let's say with a new coach, their defense is struggling. The days of Tayshaun Prince starting small forward may be ending. Golden State, I disagree with you that they're a bad defensive team. They were pretty good last year. They're third right now in the league in points allowed per possession. They've played a terrible schedule. We'll see. They played one good team and got blown out of the building on a back-to-back, I believe. But yeah, I mean, Houston we've discussed, and who are we leaving out among the top West teams? Oklahoma City just got Russell Westbrook back. Looks terrible without him. This is what I meant by, okay, same old Spurs. That might be enough to get it done. But it's very, very early, and we'll see how all these teams sort of shake out over the next few weeks.
You really trust Golden State's defense? So they played the Lakers on a second night of a back-to-back. They played home for Sacramento, and then they killed Philly last night. But the one good offensive team they played was the Clippers.
They beat a team that Grantland devoted like 5,000 words to in one day. So we're already discounting at Philly as an easy win.
You're right. It's fair. I need to see more. I was so appalled by their defense in that Clippers game. And I don't know. I don't know why, but I'm down on this Warriors team. I know they're just as fun as they were last year. I get the whole thing, but man, I just feel like they're all in on this team now, and I'm not sure that their top 6 is the top 6 that wins a title. Like, they extended Bogut. You like the Bogut extension, right? You were okay with it?
I was lukewarm. I mean, I understood why they did it. I would have waited to see how he played this season. And what I wrote is that I probably wouldn't have done it. I felt like the Warriors sort of hedged against the wrong thing. They hedged against Bogut having a huge year, whereas I would have hedged against his ankle breaking. Or something like that.
But yeah,
it was okay.
You wrote today about extensions, and there's a little bit of a trend this year about people kind of taking a wait-and-see approach with restricted free agents, which, FYI, I 1,000% agree with. I don't think – the more I look at it, I don't know if I would have given John Wall that massive extension. Like, what's the point? House and I argued about it yesterday on the podcast. House was like, the Wizards fans needed them to do that. And it's like, why? Because he was going to leave in a year? He can't go anywhere. All he can do is go get another contract that they match. So worst case scenario, it's 4 years, $60 million. Like, what's the point of giving him 5 years? It's not Kevin Love.
Well, that's what I wrote when they did it, is that I wouldn't have done it. we have about 25 games worth of evidence that John Wall is a max-level player. I'd like to see another 50 games of evidence that John Wall is a max-level player.
It seems fair, right? It seems fair to want to see 75 games of John Wall as a $90 million player. Can I get 75? Is that fair?
Yeah, no, ultimately it's probably not going to matter because it looks as if he's going to play up to that contract. But it does say something about how the Wizards and how some teams do business differently than other teams. Some teams are worried about agents. Some teams are worried about guys pouting if they don't get an extension. Some teams are worried about other clients that agent might represent and how that will sort of have a trickle-down effect. Other teams are not worried about those kind of things to the same degree. The Wizards are worried about all that stuff about morale and, the new era of Wizards basketball after a gazillion years of being bad and all that kind of ephemeral stuff. And some teams don't care about that. And so, look, the Wizards acted the way they did. It's going to be fine. John Wall's a very good player. There was no point in doing that deal.
Now, the flip side of that, we both agree that Indiana should have taken care of Paul George.
Yeah. Look, Paul George is sort of improving in tangible ways every single year. He's already an absolute elite defensive force, one of the 10 to 15 best defenders in the league already at age 23 or whatever he is. And he gets better on offense every single year. And he's got, to prove himself a little bit more as a ball handler. He can be turnover prone. It can get ugly sometimes, but he's exploded out of the gates, looking like a totally different player so far this year. And just in terms of a guy who shows up to work every day, is a force on defense, is unselfish, does every single thing that's involved in playing NBA basketball pretty well. I'm willing to bet on that guy.
And would you say right now he might be the third best forward in the league? He might have taken that spot from Carmelo. It's actually an argument now, I feel like.
Small forward behind LeBron and KD?
Now, he might just be the best forward.
Well, you throw all those fours into the conversation, depending on how you define Duncan, who's more of a center, but yeah, Kevin Love. But yeah, Paul George, look, you don't have to tell me about Paul George. I argued during the conference semifinals last year. This debate isn't Paul George. 2 years ago, it was like Paul George or Melo. Who would you rather have for the next 5 years? That was where Paul George entered the debate. Last year during the playoffs, it was already who would I rather have right now? Paul George. Paul George is a better player than Carmelo Anthony right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you just talk about forwards, Dirk's in there, Kirk, Paul George, Carmelo, maybe LaMarcus Aldridge, Kevin Love. I actually wouldn't put Aldridge in there the more I'm thinking about it, but I think you can make a really good case Paul George is the third best forward in the league. And if you're Indiana, you're a small market team, you can't even risk it. It's like, oh, he wants to play here for 5 years? Done. I'm giving you 5 years. This is the mistake Minnesota made with Kevin Love. It's like, oh, Kevin Love wants to be here 5 years? Okay, done. Where do we sign? I don't feel that way about John Wall. I needed to see more. And if he came back to haunt them, that would have been great. Then you give him 4 years, 60, and you try to make it up for him over the next 4 years that you did take care of him. But you were talking about also guys like Gordon Hayward. I don't think Utah should have paid Gordon Hayward. Let's see him earn it. As you pointed out, forgettable defensive player. He's a good offensive player. He's getting better. His market value probably reminds me of like the Gallinari type of extension. And if his people didn't want to sign for $9-10 million a year for 4 years, then wait. Let's see if somebody like the Celtics are going to offer a max contract. I really doubt it. Like we saw this happen last year with Pekovic. It seemed crazy that Pekovic was going to enter the open restricted market, but nobody made him an offer. And this is a guy who's above average, really, really skilled offensive center, and nobody was interested. So I think teams overthink this stuff sometimes. What is the ceiling, do you think, for a Hayward contract?
Well, I'm sure that I know that Hayward's people brought up Paul George and said, look, they're statistically comparable. We want the same sort of max deal that Paul George got. And there is no one around the league who thinks right now that Gordon Hayward is a max player. The Gallo comp was made to me by several people that you just made.
Yep.
And, 10, 11 million, that kind of range. I think that will be fair. And again, what's the downside for Utah? Gordon Hayward absolutely blows up this year. is more efficient than we think he's going to be, is a better defender than we think he's going to be, and puts up 23, 5 and 5, someone offers him a max deal, you're like, okay, you played up to it. I match. I'm happy. There's no downside in waiting. There's very little down. The downside is the unlikely scenario that he sort of plateaus and one team is still so high on Gordon Hayward that they throw the max at him, and then you have to think about it. And that is an unlikely scenario and one that you can work into a sign and trade if you really want to, just like the Kings did with Tyreek Evans, a rare restricted free agent that another team really wanted to go after. So, yeah, I don't in a deal like Hayward, he's a fungible wing player. Those guys tend to get squeezed a little bit sometimes in restricted free agency. The waiting was easily the right call. And by the way, as an aside, you know who's going to enter? You know who's going to burst through this, who are the best forwards debate that you were just having?
Who?
Anthony Davis. Get ready.
Oh, yeah,
Anthony Davis explosion is happening. He's going to be in that debate soon.
But we could see it happening in the preseason. In the preseason, he almost single-handedly made me regret thinking the Pelicans couldn't make the playoffs. I still don't think they're going to make it because that team's kind of a mess, but he looks fantastic. I feel a little vindicated. I loved Anthony Davis coming out of college. Hey, speaking of that, you didn't see the Julius Randle highlights last night, did you? I know it's November 5th. I shouldn't be already into college hoops and thinking Celtics, but Julius Randle looks like he's 30 years old. Have you seen him?
I have not seen him. Julius Randle could be in my apartment building right now, and I wouldn't be entirely sure who it was. You
have to go on YouTube and watch 27 seconds of Julius Randle, and then you're like, oh my God. I wrote about this a little yesterday in the shoot-around. I've already turned on the Celtics. Last night was a beautiful loss in Memphis. It couldn't have worked out better. Like up 3 with 3 minutes to go below the game. More of those,
it was
please.
Just like the loss in Detroit that you wrote about, except they didn't fall from ahead
right
in that game as much as they just sort of sputtered throwing the ball out of bounds every single possession. But yeah, they're not going to be good. It's going to be a long season of Celtics basketball.
I wonder when I think Brad Stevens deep down was like, yeah, everybody thinks we're going to suck, but I've done more with less before. Just wait. When this season starts, I have a couple wrinkles up my sleeve. And now he's 0-4, and he's got to be thinking like, oh, my God. Oh, my God. There's 4 minutes left, and I have no idea who to call play for. Like, Jeff Green is all fun and games when KG and Paul Pierce and Rondo are on the court. But when he's your number one option and the other team knows it, that's trouble. When the other team can actually set their defense to stop Jeff Green, he's not scoring. It's not happening. So it's trouble. But wait, the whole reason I brought up the restricted free agents and the contracts was to talk about Bogut. The Warriors are now locked into this team, which I thought was the most interesting thing about the Bogut contract, because that was their most tradable asset for this season, which was another reason I wouldn't have signed him to that deal. And that's going forward now. I don't know how they make this team better without ponying up Harrison Barnes in a trade. Like, basically the point is this is their team. And I watch this team and they're thrilling offensively, and Curry is the next Maravich. But I still can't imagine them in the finals with the team they have. Am I too down on them?
You might be too down on. Look, I can't imagine them in the finals either. But the early awards we've seen on these other teams are more serious than I anticipated they would be. And look, let's get a couple of things clear about Bogut, right? So number one, he was not going to be a restricted free agent. The Warriors would still have had his bird rights and been able to do other things that teams, couldn't do. But I don't want to confuse people. He was not going to be restricted. His deal also gets smaller in salary as it goes on, which is a benefit to them as Klay Thompson and Harrison Barnes come up for contracts. And look, the dilemma they faced was, okay, so you trade Bogut or you don't extend Bogut. Who is playing center for the Warriors either this season if you trade him or next season if you allow him to go into free agency? Because the crop of centers in free agency this summer is not good. It's Okafor and Kaman and those kind of guys. And the Warriors rightfully, I think, believe, hey, we have the perimeter talent of a championship team. We can't just go into the season with Chris Kaman as like a stopgap center, hoping to get another guy down the road. And that's a tough call for a team to make.
Yeah, I guess I just don't trust Bogut's going to stay on the court. And $12 million a year seems like a lot. Like, what did Splitter get? 9?
Yeah. Well, what did who get?
Tiago Splitter got 9.
Splitter got 9. Splitter was a restricted free agent that Portland went after and offered 4 and 36. Yeah, Bogut for 12 is a lot. That's why I didn't like the extension. I thought that the Warriors sort of wagered the wrong way, although I understood why they did it. The wild card with the Warriors, and I agree, they feel like a team that's a little bit fragile, and even at peak form is sort of like one player away. If David Lee's contract were just a year shorter, I feel like they could work like David Lee plus pick Thompson or Barnes plus one of our young prospects like Nedovic plus a couple second-round picks and turn it into like Al Horford. And then they'd be a complete badass team. But David Lee's contract is just too long. And look, and by the way, Atlanta said no to everyone who's called about Al Horford, but that may change as the year goes on. But you can sub in whatever, better two-way power forward than David Lee you can think of. But David Lee's contract is just too long. And of course, they traded so many first-round picks to Utah that it's hard. They can't right now trade a first-round pick. But that's the piece that they need to improve.
I'm looking up David Lee's contract as you're talking here.
3 more this year plus 2 more. It's one of those, I think it was a 6-year contract. It's the kind of contract that they've legislated basically out of the CBA.
Right.
You can't. It's like one of the last remaining albatross contracts in the league.
So after this year, he has $30.5 million for the next 2. They're not trading that contract.
No, too much. That's what I say. It's 1 year too long. If you could see the end a little bit closer, it would be doable.
With that said, if they would like Gerald Wallace's contract for David Lee, I'm all in. Just say, call Danny. I'm ready.
Did
Love to have David Lee in the Suns.
Stat line last night?
28 minutes, no field goal attempts.
That is hard to do in the NBA. You put me in the NBA game in an NBA game for 28 minutes, I am taking a shot. I don't care if JJ Barea rejects it, 10 rows into the crowd. I am making sure I record a field goal attempt in 28 minutes.
Zach, please don't criticize the LVP of the 2013-14 season, Gerald Wallace.
By the way, why he complains after every single game?
I know.
Can you give it a rest with they're not trying hard and where's the effort and I'm puffing out my chest as the veteran leader of the team? I have a lot of respect for Gerald Wallace. He plays hard. He plays smart. His decline in athleticism and shooting makes me sad as a human being. But can you just does it have to be like every other game? It's like Gerald Wallace rants again. I mean, give it a rest.
My dad said the same thing after game 3. He's like, I don't mind this losing, but Gerald Wallace needs to shut up. We have a bad team. Nobody wants to hear him complain about being on a bad team. Give the money back. I was like, all right, Dad.
Also, shoot once. You know how damaging it is to have a wing player who refuses to shoot? Shoot. Make them guard you at least. I mean, remember the Nets Bulls series last year? They were guarding him as if it were you or me on the court.
Yeah. Well, I think what happened is he shot them out of game 2 and game 3. And then maybe got a little gun shy, which is fine. I'm fine with a gun shy Gerald Wallace. As long as the losses keep mounting, I don't really care what happens. Memphis, it seems like you're not ready to give up on Memphis.
Why does that surprise you? You compared my loyalty to the Grizzlies to Tom Cruise's loyalty to the Scientology belief system. So would you expect after 4 games that I would be off the grit and grind bandwagon?
You're right. I should just move on. Although I will say it's really a shame that they ended up assuming that Tayshaun Prince contract. The Rudy Gay trade could have been so perfect had they just kept Calderon for the year and then just lost him for nothing. You know, it really would have been because it's not like Rudy Gay is lighting the world on fire in Toronto. I'm already getting emails from the Toronto fans complaining about him. But to turn that Rudy Gay contract into, 7.5 and 7.5 next year for Tayshaun when they didn't have to? That part was rough. That was a misevaluation. You got to admit, right? I mean, he's washed up.
Well, they were facing an interesting question, which is if we don't get another small forward, who is playing that position for us? And they liked the sort of cost certainty that Tayshaun Prince brought them. At least we have the position covered. We're butting up against the tax. We don't have to worry about that.
But we both know that's the easiest position to find dudes in the summer. And they could have Calderon. They could have flipped, right? He was $10 million, but they could have done a one-on-one flip for him for somebody else.
It would have been possible, and their recent extension for Quincy Pondexter. I mean, Quincy sort of leans more toward he's like a 2.5. He's not quite a 3. Bigger
right.
Small forwards would be able to exploit him a little bit, but you know, Tayshaun Prince, I don't think is going to be the starting small forward for the Memphis Grizzlies much longer. I mean, that lineup with him and Tony Allen it was successful last season. The spacing concerns are just too serious, especially as Zebo is not sort of as powerful, and he's never been explosive. That's the wrong word. He's not quite the old Zebo anymore, and he needs a little extra room to work. Yeah. And that lineup has the opposite effect. And the problem is, you know, I think Pondexter is the only one who makes sense really as a starter, because you can't. I mean, they played Mike Miller 30 minutes the other night. You can't be playing Mike Miller 30 minutes.
I know. We were in Countdown Friday night watching all the games at once, and Miller played all of crunch time and then in overtime, and we're like, what are they? I think that game went to overtime. We were like, what are they doing? They're gonna play Mike Miller 30 minutes a game in November? Like, that's how bad this is for them already. He'll be in a hospital by mid-December. There's no way that's going to continue. I think they need to get Tayshaun back to Detroit so he can run washed-up pick and rolls with Chauncey Billups, who might be the most washed-up player in the league right now. Poor Chauncey.
Ooh,
just hang it up, Chauncey.
That's harsh. The most washed-up player in the league.
Who's playing minutes.
Who's playing minutes. Okay, that's, you know, we could find some other candidates for that. But, yeah, no, he can't. Again, I don't think he's going to be starting 20 games from now. He's not bringing enough to the table at what he's supposed to bring. Passing, defense, moving around the floor, that's all nice, but he's just not bringing quite enough of that to justify all the giant minus that he is just standing around on offense.
He's playing like 28 minutes a game. The game on Friday night, they ran the game-winning play for him, and of course he shot a 3 off the front of the rim because he's my age. I didn't like that move. I watched him last year. I thought he was washed up last year. You tear your Achilles at that age with the kind of game he has, and I don't know if you're coming back from that, which is why it's going to be so interesting to see when Kobe comes back. Have you heard anything?
No, not anything that's beyond what's been reported. That, you know, he needs a couple of weeks of conditioning once he actually can return to full basketball activities, and, you know, people are throwing around late November, December, the holidays. I no one has any idea, but you know, we'll see. We'll see if the Lakers can hang around 500 before that date. I'm skeptical of that, but, you know, they're 2-2 for now.
I'm more than skeptical. All right, you have to pick one of these two comments. Either A, Denver is not going to make the playoffs, or B, Minnesota is a legitimate contender in the West, or C, neither.
Well, Denver is not going to make the playoffs. That was one of my 32 quote bold predictions for the season, was that Denver would fall from 57 wins to the lottery. So I'm going to stick with that. I've seen nothing when I've watched them so far, but they're 0-2. Of course, I've seen nothing. I mean, they look like a mess. They'll get better. They'll win a lot of home games, and that's the tricky part about betting against Denver, is they usually just walk in to 28 or 30 home wins, even if they're just mediocre, because of their home court advantage. I just think the West is going to be very tough. So I'm going Denver misses the playoffs, and Minnesota is going to make the playoffs. I don't buy them as a contender, but I buy them as a playoff team.
Yeah, the X factor with Minnesota is an X factor for anybody, but with Minnesota, it has to be mentioned, is just keeping these guys on the floor. They've had phenomenal bad luck, and it would be nice if these guys could just all play 6 months together with nothing happening. But I've been surprised. I do feel like I missed on Minnesota, because it's one of those teams, when you actually watch all of those guys play together, it's one thing to think on paper, like, oh, this will happen, and this, and then this guy, and then, but when you actually see it, it's a team that makes sense, right? It's like, oh, Kevin Martin's a perfect fit for this team. And you just, everything about it, and Adelman, and I just like watching them. Even last night, they should have won last night, but I think they're for real. I just hope they can stay healthy. It's weird to say that about a team, but year after year, it's just the rug's been pulled out of this team, and I hope they can stay healthy. It's nice to have Kevin Love back, though. It's one of the things you always say not to overreact to the first couple weeks. The one thing we can properly react to is that Kevin Love looks like Kevin Love again. I mean, he's in the discussion again, I feel like.
He looks like exactly the kind of player you'd want to sign for 2 years shorter than you could in free agency. No, Kevin Love looks great. I mean, he clanked a lot of threes last night in a game. You're right that they should have won. The pieces have always fit there well. I mean, that's what's been frustrating about all the injuries. It's hard not to fit with Ricky Rubio, especially when you have a four like Kevin Love who can shoot. Love and Pekovic are devastating offensively. Kevin Martin is a longtime Adelman star. Budinger can shoot. Corey Brewer's crazy. It all makes sense before you get to Derek Williams and the bench, which is sort of secretly very shaky. But the core 6 or 5, 6, 7 guys make a lot of sense. They just haven't been able to stay healthy. I will say last night, you watched the first 36 minutes of that Cleveland game, and you are reminded why Minnesota, with Love and Pekovic on the floor together, has never defended well. I mean, Pekovic, they were on a back-to-back on the road, which is deadly in the NBA, but they've always defended poorly with those two on the floor. There's just zero rim protection, zero leaping ability. Pekovic, like his weak side help last night was basically just standing around doing nothing. Yeah. That's an ongoing concern, and they rallied with Love at center with a smaller group and Dante Cunningham running around at power forward. But that I think puts a ceiling on the team, but that ceiling is still high enough that if they're healthy, they should score and make the playoffs.
And that's also a team that has a trade to make too. I mean, all these teams do, but I'm 99% sure they have their first round pick this year. And Williams' contract is much more expensive than you'd think it would be for somebody who's still on a rookie deal. I think it's close to like $7 million. That's a team that could just flip Derek Williams in their first round pick into Thaddeus Young tomorrow, and that now you're talking about a different kind of ceiling. If I'm Philly, I don't think I'd trade Thaddeus Young.
Number one, I was a little surprised they picked. Well, no, I thought it was a 50-50 call picking up Williams' option because it is expensive, and they're butting up against the tax next year if they use the mid-level exception as things stand now. The tricky thing with them is, and I was talking about this with someone yesterday, they owe their first-round pick to Phoenix. It's protected top 13. So
that's trouble.
If they make the playoffs, they'll have to give it, which is troubling and limits their ability to make a trade. If they can't trade a pick, essentially, it's very hard for them to do it. And they owe that pick because they chased another team's restricted free agent, Nick Batum, and they had to dump left and right, all these assets to open up the cap room to do that. And one of them was Wesley Johnson, and they had to attach a first-round pick to get him to Phoenix. And now Wesley Johnson somehow plays like a stretch power forward off the bench for a bad Lakers team. But that's the kind of that was sort of a disaster, and that owing that pick is very, very damaging.
David Kahn, Chapter 19, Chapter 22, whatever bad decision that was. Everybody was like, "What do you have against Kahn?" It's like people are like, "What do you have against Kahn?" And it's like he just made a series of really bad decisions. Like I don't know what else to tell you. It's my job to point out when teams make really stupid decisions, and what you just described was. He drafted somebody, I think, with the third pick in the draft who was a bust and then was so desperate to get rid of him to create cap space for this guy that he ended up not being able to sign, Nick Batum, that he lost their first-round pick this year. They don't have a first-round pick because he thought he could sign somebody that they ended up not signing. Like, who does that? And this wasn't even one of the 3 worst moves he ever made. But it's a shame because if they had that first-round pick, and also, like, I still feel like they should have just kept Trey Burke. Like, I feel like he would have trade value too if they wanted to package those guys. Do you think Philly wins 3 games, everybody gets all excited. Do you feel like that team is off the trade market now, or would that make them even more resilient to make trades and make this team worse?
They're not going to be off the trade market. I mean, we saw last night that there's some regression to the mean coming, and it came in the form of Golden State. Golden State could have won that game by 45. If they kept their starters and then kept their foot on the gas. There are losses coming, and the Sixers are way too smart to get excited about a 3-game sample size. As impressive as that was, that's not going to change their thinking. No.
Well, the one good thing is MC Dub. I certainly
is that what we call him, MC Dub?
I'm calling him MC Dub for now, unless somebody can top it. I don't like the hyphen. We've tried to give people the nickname the hyphen for a while, and it never seems to stick. But MC Dub is rolls off the tongue, and I enjoy it. I don't want to call somebody MCW. We never say W. But MC Dub, I think, could work. But I just had no idea he was going to be this good. I got to say, I'm rarely totally blindsided by a college guy who I've seen. But the speed and size that he has, he just picked it up right away. He's already in fifth gear NBA style, and I think he's legit. And yeah, I don't know if I would trade Evan Turner. I kind of like that backcourt together, but we'll see what they do. But at the very least, we can say he's the Rookie of the Year favorite right now, I think.
Right, it's either him or Oladipo. Mike MCW, sexy start. They won their games. Oladipo's numbers are also very good. They're both very good defensive players. They're going to be very good defensive players. And, I think Oladipo may have more staying power than MCW in terms of numbers and Rookie of the Year votes. But those are clearly the two favorites. And MCW is going to put up numbers all year. I mean, he's going to get minutes and numbers, period.
Well, you know how much I love Oladipo. I feel very vindicated by this. So I couldn't have been more vindicated by how Oladipo looks, but I was totally wrong on MC Dub, and it makes me now I feel like I'm just batting 500 on this too. I wish I had
the secret to that is just be like me and don't watch college basketball and watch only NBA so that you can't be wrong about projecting college players.
That's interesting theory. Oladipo. Wait, I mean, it's a little early to panic about Anthony Bennett, I guess, but I'm still not sure what position he is. I feel the same way I did when with Derek Williams when he was struggling, and it became clear to me that he was a stretch four, but they can't play him at stretch four because they have Love and Pekovic, so it's just been this uneasy experience for him. With Bennett, ultimately, like, you spent the number 1 overall pick on this guy. He sure seems like a power forward to me. Like, I can't imagine playing him at the 3. He's just too big and too cumbersome. I don't really know where he plays for that team, and I'm not sure they do either. He's 0 for 15 to start the year. Too early to panic?
That's bad, I think. I don't know about math, but I think 0 baskets in 4 games is bad.
It's not great.
No, way too early to panic. But yeah, they're playing him basically exclusively at the 4. He looks like a 4. He plays like a 4, but that may be just because that's where they're playing it. I haven't seen much evidence that he can be anything else. But Oladipo doesn't worry me so much. Concerns about what position Oladipo plays sort of remind me of like, oh, Russell Westbrook's not a pure point guard. Maybe he should be on the 2 or play the wing. But I don't really care if you can handle the ball, get into the lane, get to the foul line a gazillion times, score a lot of points, create for your teammates without, disastrous turnover results. You can be whatever you want. Just get the ball to him. And when I watch Oladipo, I'm not making a comparison to Russell Westbrook, but that's who I think of. Like, he's clearly not a pure point guard. He's going to have problems reading the floor. He's going to have a lot of turnover. He's going to commit charging violations. He's going to miss passing lanes, all the stuff that that drove people crazy about Westbrook. But at the end of the day, you're going to look up at the stats and say, hey, he scored 20 points. He had 8 free throw attempts, 5 assists, shot over 50%. Like, that's pretty freaking good.
And 1 or 2 plays would make you go, wow, which can't be slept on. I think he's ultimately a 2 guard. I don't really think it matters, but I will tell you this. I think it would have been awesome to have him and Kyrie Irving on the same team. I kind of wish that had happened. I've never seen Deion Waiters have a moment that made me think, oh, yeah, you can't take another 2 guard. We have Deion Waiters. I mean, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry you spent the 4th pick in the draft with him, but he's a 6th man.
Deion Waiters is threatening Dwayne Wade's title as the worst transition player from defense to offense among all guards in the NBA. Deion Waiters, I highlighted one of these plays in my column today. There was another one last night. Well, he'll take a jump shot. It will hit the rim. His guy will have already leaked out 4 steps. He'll still be standing there holding his pose, even though the shot has now been rebounded. It's like he wants to start a conversation with the guys on the bench, and the play is continuing, and his guy is now past half court, and then he starts running. It's like, and that's just symptomatic of sort of larger Dion Waiters things. I actually like Dion Waiters. I feel like I'm going to be the last guy off the Dion Waiters bandwagon. He's explosive. He gets to the rim. He's got tricky moves. He's a deceivingly good athlete, but he just does dumb stuff that's ultimately going to undermine his value unless he cleans it up. And again, it's just beginning his second year, so let's be patient. But yeah,
I like Dion Waiters as well, but not as my two guard that I'm going to go to war with for the next 10 years over Victor Oladipo. I think he's ultimately a sixth man. He would have been an awesome third guard.
We beat up Cleveland over the collective sort of pundits beat up Cleveland over the Tristan Thompson pick because Valanciunas was still available. Tristan Thompson has worked his way into becoming a very nice NBA power forward on both ends of the floor, and he's getting better and better and better. Ultimately, that pick may be a miss, but it's not going to be like a disastrous miss that you missed out on Valanciunas and settled for Tristan Thompson.
But wait a second. If you believe that, and if they believe that, then why did they then take another power forward 2 years later?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
As Chris Grant, they do love Tristan Thompson. The one thing I will say is they tried to trade that pick, and obviously they didn't want to trade it for nothing. They wanted to trade it for LaMarcus Aldridge, and they wanted to trade it for Kevin Love, and people looked at that pick and said, and non-Cleveland people that were thinking about it looked at that pick and said, you have the number one pick in a draft that doesn't have a number one pick in it. I don't want that pick. And I think they were left sort of, taking a sort of swing at a guy who's interesting and explosive and all of that. And it was a tough pick. And I don't know what I would have done with it, but it was, in their defense, it was a tough pick. Positionally, it is weird. Yes. You
should join the White House as their new head of PR. You can spin anything.
Who would you take? And you would have taken Oladipo, I guess?
100%. I said it the whole time. At least we knew Oladipo was going to be good. We knew what he could do. We knew, like, worst case scenario, he was going to be like an awesome version of Tony Allen. And it was the problem is it was a draft.
The history of being too concerned about positions at the top of the draft is bad. You should take the best player available.
Guy. Who is the safest bet? And if this is a mess of a draft, I'm not rolling the dice. So just tell me who the safest pick is. I'm trying to build this team that's going to be awesome for a year from now if there's any chance LeBron can come back. And I don't know why you roll the dice there. I don't get it. The other problem, they had the same problem Denver has. They're playing a ton of guys. I think Denver played 11 guys a game in the first two games. Cleveland was playing 10. Yesterday they cut it down to or Cleveland's playing 11. Yesterday they cut it down to 10. But it seems like they have a lot of dudes, which makes me nervous. And you felt like heading into the season, if things started out shaky for Cleveland, they were a panic trade waiting to happen. Do you still feel that way?
If they can, yeah. I mean, I do. They want to make the playoffs. Their owner's a little crazy about it. They want to be a desirable destination for LeBron. They can't afford to flounder around, and be the 10th best team in the Eastern Conference. So they don't believe that they can. So yeah, I do. And as you say, they have the most nondescript small forward rotation in the league. It's still a giant hole. They'd like to fill it. They'd like to get a star, whether it's there at another position. So we'll see who they. I mean, you floated Rudy Gay before. That would be a very bad panic trade, especially if he picks up his option and soaks up their cap room. And I think that's what mitigates that against them making a panic trade, is they want that cap room for LeBron. So we'll see. But they need more pieces, and their owner wants to make the playoffs, and that tends to be a bad combination, as we just saw with the Wizards. That tends to lead to trades of present value for more valuable future stuff.
Both you and I did not like that Wizards trade. The Wizards fans liked it. I know two of them, Joe House and Andrew Sharp, both of whom were like, no, we got to do it. We got to make the playoffs. Tired of whatever. And in 5 days, they've completely flipped. And now it's like, no, the trade can't hurt us because we're going to be one of the worst teams. I can't remember a fan base flipping on a trade or like the outcome of a trade faster than this. But do you think at some point the Wizards are going to have to stare in the mirror and say the worst case scenario here would be for us to be like the 10th worst team? Like, we might as well bottom out and make a run at this. But that would involve firing the GM, firing the coach. How does this situation play out?
Well, they can't bottom out. I mean, if you have John Wall and Bradley Beal, though he's struggling, some competent small forwards and a decent big man, you're going to win enough games that you can't bottom out. That said, this is a messy situation. Randy Whitman was my pick through no fault of his own, as first coach on the guillotine. If they start badly again, remember they started 1-12 2 years ago, whatever they were, 4-27 or something unbelievable last year. They're getting the shakes right now at 0-3 because they've been down this road before. They've seen seasons come apart almost before they've even started. And look what's happening to them. Nene is already hurt. They're starting Trevor Booker at power forward, which is, Trevor Booker's an okay player. You don't want him to start at power forward. Their defense has suffered immensely without Okafor and Nene. Their small forwards have been uneven. Bradley Beal struggling again. They have no backup big men of any consequence. It's a very fragile situation. I don't like the way it started.
And when we were doing countdown on Friday when they blew that Sixers game, we were looking at their schedule because we were like, oh, this isn't great for Randy Whitman. And if they blow this Philly game tomorrow night, Wednesday, the next four are home for Brooklyn, at Oklahoma City, at Dallas, at San Antonio. They have the Texas Triangle coming up. And if they lose this Philly game, they could be 0-8. And Randy Whitman will not be around to see 0-9 or 1-8 or whatever. That's it for him. He doesn't get out of Texas, I think. But then what do you do? Like, do you go for George Karl? Do you go for Lionel Hollins? Like, that's a whole other thing. I'm not sure a new coach is going to fix this.
Well, the in-season change, sort of naturally takes you to the next guy down the bench and not the high-profile, franchise-changing hire, who will want an off-season to shape the team and have input into the draft and all that. So, yeah, I don't know that they're going to get a big star like that. But I agree with you. I mean, look, they're getting the shakes. They've been down again. They've lost. The last two seasons for them have been over 15 games in. That's the nightmare scenario that they've lived through. They don't want to face it again. It's depressing. Their play-by-play guy, Steve Buckhantz, already sounds like he's weeping halfway through the broadcast again. The poor guy just can't catch a break, and they can't go down that road. And I agree with you. If they that game against Philly on Wednesday, that's a big game for them.
Yeah, that's the game of the night, even though it feels like it shouldn't be. But I'm most interested in that because if Washington rolls over and they lose by 18, that I don't think Randy Whitman makes it to Game 5. I'm bummed. I think you're going to win this one because I had Dwayne Casey. You had Randy Whitman.
You had Ty Corbin.
Oh, I had Ty Corbin. You're right. Oh, I thought I had Dwayne Casey.
I saw Ty Corbin today, by the way. It was an unpleasant interaction at their shoot-around in Brooklyn.
Oh, no. Is it my fault?
No, it wasn't. For once, it was not your fault. No, it was. Here's what happened with Ty Corbin. I asked him that I said I had watched your team the other night in Houston. It seemed like, I asked him a question about their pick-and-roll defense, basically. It seemed like Derek Favors and Cantor were coming out pretty far on pick-and-rolls, and is that their strategy every night? Are they going to change it by opponent? And he looked at me, he's like, what, you asked me to tell you our scouting report? What are you, crazy? And I said, well, some coaches are willing to talk X's and O's with me. And then he just said, well, why don't you talk to those other coaches then? Don't talk to me. I said, okay, see you later, coach. Wow, it did not go well for me and Ty Corbin today. It did not go well.
I'm just glad I wasn't involved because I think you've probably had 10 unpleasant NBA interactions in the last couple of years, and I was probably responsible for 8 of them, just secondhand.
8 of them are Billy King. So generally everyone in the NBA is very nice to me and likes to talk basketball. Sometimes I write something that pisses people off, but they get over it after a couple of days. But yes, there have been some poisonous interactions, and well, we'll just leave it there.
Well, in Billy's defense, I probably shouldn't have made fun of the fact that they gave up a top 3 protected first-round pick that turned into the Rookie of the Year for Gerald Wallace, who they then overpaid. I don't know why I thought that was anything.
But then the Gerald Wallace contract turned out to be essential.
I guess. Sure. I guess.
Accidentally.
No way you get KG Pierce. 2 things, and then we're going to go. Brooklyn started out 1-2, but played a very impressive game in Miami. I like the way that team looks. I like their bench. The one slight concern, and I'm not going to overreact to it yet, but KG does look about, 12% older than he did last year, maybe 18%. And it just makes me worried that we're not going to get the Celtics KG on this Brooklyn team. I guess we will see. But when you watch that Brooklyn team, what do you think?
Well, and D. Will also hasn't hit double figures yet, and mysteriously missed the preseason with some injury that no one was really willing to talk all that much about. I think they're going to be fine. They just have too much talent. I love Karolinko off the bench.
Me too.
I like the fact that Karolinko at the 4 and like some combination of Jason Terry, Allen Anderson, and a point guard can give them sort of a speedy counter look to their starting lineup, which is mostly sort of slow and plodding. I like that mix of gears. You mentioned KG. Look, the secret of, not the secret, but KG's defense has been in decline now for 2 or 3 seasons. He's still a very good team defender. He's just not as fast and athletic as he used to be. And if he falls off a little bit more than expected this year, that's a problem for Brooklyn. But I've been high on Brooklyn from the beginning. A 1-2 start is not going to dissuade me from that, especially when the 1 is a nice, solid win at home against Miami, even though they almost blew it at the end.
Yeah, we talked about it on Friday night. The thing that impressed me most about that game, other than their bench, was how comfortable they looked against Miami. Like, there's just so much value to having Pierce and Garnett on your team when you're playing Miami. The amount of games they have played against LeBron and Wade, just couldn't have been less afraid, knew what to do. And the other thing, Doug Collins pointed out, just how much size they have on the perimeter. And they can trot out these lineups where they have Livingston, Pierce, and Joe Johnson, or Livingston, Pierce, and Allen Anderson, whoever. And when LeBron does that, when Miami does the thing where they try to switch whoever LeBron's guarding to have him go against somebody who's smaller, you can't really do that against Brooklyn because everybody's 6'7", 6'8", and it just seemed like it bothered LeBron a little bit. I like that matchup for Brooklyn, but we're going to have to see, first of all, if KG, how much he has in the tank. And then, as you said, this Brooklyn team can't win the title if Darren Williams doesn't play like a franchise player. They just can't. The way they're built, it can't be Paul Pierce winning 16 playoff games for them. So they need to see. I do wonder, it's not inconceivable to me that they would trade Darren Williams if this didn't work out. I know that sounds crazy and his contract is nuts, but stranger things have happened because they don't have a lot of moves left. Like, this is their team, you know?
Yeah, this is their team. I think it's way too early to talk about that, but
I figured you would.
It's, let's watch. I mean, people were down on D. Will last year. He had a very bad first half of the season by his standards. He got to whatever happened to his ankle, cortisone shot, PRP, radiation treatment, whatever, super healing thing he got, and he was fine. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. And you're right. Their size is in a league where teams, if they have the personnel, like to go small and spread the floor, like to switch against a Miami team that likes to switch everything to the point that it's like, do they even care about which one-on-one matchup they have? The ability to just dump the ball into the post and draw a double team is very valuable, and they can do that at almost every position.
We did a thing on Friday about guys that are out of excuses on Friday's show. And, guys who basically handpicked whatever team they're on and are in a great situation. And now it's time to find out if they're legitimate superstars or not. Darren Williams, to me, is at the top of that list because you watch that Brooklyn team and it's like, wow, this couldn't be a better situation for him. You have all these veterans who can run the locker room for him. His best friend is the coach. They have a 10-man team. Everything is set up so that as long as he plays at a certain level that we've come to expect from them, he's going to succeed and thrive on this team. And if he can't get there, I think that's the biggest red flag possible. But the other team I'm not going to overreact on is Chicago. I just thought Noah's 50%, you could tell, and Rose looks rusty. And I'm not ready to panic about this team yet, especially my title pick. I liked what I saw from Jimmy Butler. The one thing that worried me is it seems like they've fallen back into that 2010, 2011 mode of, it's the last 5 minutes, Derek, take us home. And Miami has proven that doesn't work against them. They can stop it. They can stop any team when they know only one guy is going to shoot. They're very good at doing that. And you're not getting by Miami, and I don't think you're getting by Indiana either with that offense. What do you think they can do to fix that?
Well, again, they're the ultimate it's early team because Noah's been banged up. Deng is clearly rusty. Jimmy Butler is sort of feeling his way again after being unleashed a little bit in the playoffs last year when everyone was hurt. When I've seen them, he's looked a little bit tentative as a secondary ball handler, and they need him to not be tentative. They need him to catch and go. The opportunity is there. And, of course, Rose is recovering from a year and a half off. And without Rose, they had to sort of take their offense down to the bare bones, run it through Noah and Boozer at the elbows and a bunch of people running around. And now they've got Rose back, and they're trying to find a happy medium. They've redesigned their offense again to sort of, so it's not just pick and roll with Rose, and it's not just big men at the elbows, and it's a mixture of lots of different things. And that's just going to take time, and guys are going to have to be healthy. And their bench is thin. I mean, they have no bench. They have Dunleavy, who's okay if it can't guard anyone. They have Taj Gibson, who's very good. And then after that, it's like, okay, I mean, who's coming? Who's next? Who's the next man up? Nazim Muhammad? I mean, they're another, if they weren't a tax team, they would be another Okafor buyout team. Just another nice big man to stick in the rotation. There's insurance for Noah and all that. But they have a track record that says we are going to be fine. Just give us time.
Yeah. I think they miss Nate and Bellinelli, the freelancing that they could do in a weird way, even though it was so unpredictable and you didn't know if it was going to show up from game to game, really helped them. And now they don't really have anybody. Like, I always call those guys, like, they're beyond wild cards. Like, Nate is like, you don't know what the hell's going to happen when Nate comes in. But at least the other team was thinking about it. It's like, oh, that guy's in. What's going to happen? And then Chicago's thinking the same thing. It's a very predictable team now. And
I've enjoyed, by the way, Denver playing Nate, Andre Miller, and Ty Lawson all at the same time, which has happened for a few minutes here or there, which is delightful. Look, Nate and Marco Bellinelli are both very capable of ball handlers. It can run a pick and roll in a second, can do a lot of things off of it. Jimmy Butler and Mike Dunleavy aren't those kind of players. They're not as good ball handlers, and they're not as reliable as, swing the ball to them and run a second pick and roll and they'll do something. I think the Bulls are betting on A, Rose is going to be healthy and playing 40-plus minutes a game in the playoffs, and B, Jimmy Butler is going to get there as a secondary ball handler. And those are long-term bets. And I think they were smart bets to make, but you're right that right now that offense can stall out because they don't have that release valve that those guys were.
And maybe they just missed on that Dunleavy signing. I liked it when they did it, but, in retrospect, somebody like Gary Neal, I think, would have helped them more. At least with Gary Neal, Gary Neal can become a heat check guy. That's what they're really missing. They don't have a heat check guy. It's weird to say, you need a heat check guy, but sometimes it's nice to have that guy who can come in the second quarter and all of a sudden he just scored 8 points in 50 seconds and you know what the hell just happened. They don't have anybody like that now. I just think it's putting a lot of pressure on Rose early. Do you see his PR? It's like 1. He's got a 1 PR right now.
It has not. He looks rusty. He's going to be rusty. He's going to miss a lot of shots. That's fine. It's a long season.
Long season.
They're going to defend like hell. They're going to win a lot of games.
You and I love Noah more than anybody in the planet. And when he's 50%, it's a different team. When he's 100,
the thing is, he can't be 50% in the playoffs. Whatever they need to do, they need to. And there's no exact science to it. There's no guarantee that doing what the Spurs do with Duncan is going to get everyone healthy at the right time. Look what happened to Ginobili and Parker in the playoffs last year. Whatever they can do to increase their chances of Noah being 100% or 90% of the playoffs, they have to do because they can't do any damage if he's 50%.
And as we've mentioned pretty much every time you've been on the podcast, they have a lot of trade assets. No team is better equipped to address whatever problems they have than this team. Now, we don't know if they'll do that. And it's a team that's already paying the luxury tax. It's a team that really doesn't have a history of making big blockbuster moves. And I don't know. We'll see. It's early. It's super early. The couple things that we've learned, though, Michael Carter-Williams is good. It's really fun to watch Minnesota. Brooklyn makes sense as a team. The Western Conference is going to have more games along the lines of that 137 and 130 type thing. Ooh. I think we're going to see a few of those this year. And that's about all we've learned.
And Steve Nash looks old, which makes me really, really sad.
I know. I know. I felt bad. I said that on TV on Friday night, and I almost felt like I should have couched it and said like a 20-second preamble of, just for the record, this is a 2-time MVP and one of the best point guards I've ever seen in my life. So I feel awful saying this, but yeah, he looks old and he looks stiff and he looks just like he shouldn't be playing basketball.
But by the way, he should look old. He's almost 40, and he broke his
40
year. He should look old. The fact that he's playing at a decent level is a testament to how great Steve Nash is. He should be out of the league, and he's still a decent player. That said,
Yes.
I saw a report that the Raptors were kicking around trading for Nash. They would absolutely blow me away if that were actually true. I just don't see Toronto with a new leadership having any interest in a sentimental deal like that, even though, they don't love Kyle Lowry and they have no point guard to take over next year. Just as an aside, I don't see that happening. But yes, we've learned a lot of things. The NBA is back, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and last thing, you mentioned Kyle Lowry. I think he's a very, very, very intriguing trade chip as this gets closer to February. And we talk about, like, the Bulls needing that one more guy. Like, imagine if they figured out a way to get Kyle Lowry on their team for February, March, April, May, June as a third guard / somebody who can take a little pressure off Rose, et cetera. He's somebody that could help multiple teams. He could help Golden State.
That's actually a good call. The trouble, of course, is that Chicago has to send salary out because they can't afford to get that tax bill any higher. But I agree with you. Lowry on a team where it's crystal clear to him that he's not only not the man, but like 4 spots removed from being the man is a nice place for him. You can't give him license to feel like he owns the locker room and
Right.
owns the team on the court.
There's a couple guys out there in that price range who I really like. You've mentioned a couple of them in columns, but like I think Spencer Hawes could really have an impact for a good team. I think Brandon Bass could be a really important 6th or 7th man on a good team, and so on. And I think this is one of the reasons Washington jumped on Gortat when they did, because I think teams were worried about there's only a few of these guys in that specific price range, and you might have 10, 11, 12 teams gunning for him. And they just went all in, and they made that pick top 12 protected and unprotected in 2016, and they just grabbed Gortat because they didn't think he was going to be there. So I know I love trades more than just about anybody on the planet, but I do feel like there's going to be some really good ones this year, and I'm excited for it. Zach Lowe.
Yeah, no, I predicted a lot of trades, and the flip side of that is I think that's the reason Phoenix was very smart to not waste any time, because there are a lot of other guys in that Gortat sort of price and talent range, and they were like, oh, we got a first-round pick for Gortat, done. We're not waiting, because there are a lot of other guys like that.
Yep. Zach Lowe, we will read you on Grantland. As always, a pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Have fun.
Target percent off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at PodCenter at ESPNRadio.com.
Peace out.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.